You're listening to Cottontail's podcast, part of the Silicon Valley Black Project, which produced the documentary film A Place at the Table about the Black pioneers of Silicon Valley. This documentary film, featuring African American professionals, entrepreneurs, technologists, and engineers from the past and present. Today, we are speaking to Judith Robinson, formerly employed as a thrift regulator at Comptroller of the Currency, where she enforced regulations governing the nation's savings and loan industry. She is currently self-employed and working as a leadership development coach and entrepreneur. Well, tell me, first of all, who is Judith Robinson?
I am a leader, an independent thinker, compassionate person, loving and caring, an individual first, a daughter, a wife, a mother. I'm a hard worker, volunteer person, a giver.
Yeah.
A giver.
I didn't realize that Tony was a minister, so you have that other title.
Absolutely. Yeah. He is not in charge of the church. He's not the primary pastor of the church, but he has an assistant pastor role. And so, yes, I have inherited another role in that as well. You're right.
So where were you born and raised?
Born in Texas on a farm. I never actually lived there, but my mom went back home. My dad at the time was in the military. He was overseas in the Korean conflict. So she was working in Arizona at the time, and when it came time for her to give birth, she went back to her hometown in Texas. And that's where I was born. But I've known California as my real home. I went to school in California, went to college in California, have always lived in California. So I guess I'm a transplanted Californian from Texas.
Well, I'm a native Californian, and my experience has been, if you've been in California for a year, that makes you a native. Because
Absolutely.
Everybody came from someplace else in the state.
Yeah.
So you're a native, no problem. We're being told by our media and by just movies, books, whatever, how terribly dangerous it is to live in a quote-unquote black neighborhood. I never had that experience. Did you?
No. We had I lived in a thriving black community. I would say middle class. Children on the street, always respectful neighbors, kind and loving and caring neighbors. We looked after each other. Many of my classmates with whom I still have contact and relationships, we all came from that same area. We had a fine neighborhood, well-manicured lawn. We kept up our home. Like I said, we were respectful of other people's property. We all got along. It was a wonderful and caring village, I suspect you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
In Compton, California, I know that to the outsider, Compton does not have a favorable image. It's known for a darker, more seemly reputation, but there are some good areas, some good people, some respectful and thriving and educated people, intelligent people coming from Compton. And many of my colleagues, I guess my classmates, we all were, the majority of us rather, were taught that we'll get through elementary school, graduate from high school, go to college, get a degree, uh, take on a profession, and that is what has happened to a good many
Right.
of my classmates.
I venture to say a lot of that is still true in Compton. That really hasn't changed. What did change was the media vision of what Compton was. And I think it began with movies saying, what was it, Straight Outta Compton and Boys in the
Yes,
Hood, and calling the entire town of a certain part of Los Angeles the hood when it was never considered the hood in the past. So all of that has worked its way into our uh, culture in a way that our young people begin to believe that story or that vision, that narrative about Compton and places like Compton.
Compton actually is known as the hub city, and maybe 70 years ago or so, that was an all-white community, very well established, well regarded white community. And it was well situated because it was close to downtown Los Angeles. Freeway access was good. It had its own downtown area, bustling downtown area. That was a well-to-do and well-regarded neighborhood and area. And as blacks came in, of course, there was white light. The neighborhood changed and the image changed. Unfortunately, some bad elements enter every area. The less positive image has been the image that individuals have left and described Compton to be.
Yes, yes. Well,
Unfortunately.
I see that this young woman from Compton, if I look at this correctly, it ended up being comptroller of the currency. Tell me your journey when it came to becoming that comptroller of the currency.
So I went to college in Claremont, California, and graduated with a bachelor's of arts degree. I guess I was a little different from some of my classmates who went into art and English and theater and sociology and philosophy and what have you. I majored in accounting finance with a minor in Spanish. So my business slant uh, afforded me an opportunity to start in the banking industry, which was not well populated with minorities at all. So I was one of the very, very few blacks and very few women, black women, in the banking industry. I started at Union Bank in their management training program. Stayed with Union Bank for 3 years and went on to Wells Fargo. Stayed at Wells Fargo for 7 years and went through their lending program and and moved on to uh, what at that time was known as the Federal Home Loan Bank, which was at the time the watchdog agency of the savings and loan industry, and that particular agency was morphed into what is now known as the Comptroller of the Currency under the U.S. Department of the Treasury. And the Comptroller of the Currency is responsible for the regulatory responsibilities for the savings and loan and banking industry.
And that was
So
your
I did
title.
some traveling. I did some traveling from bank to bank to bank in different regions of the United States uh, uh, with the goal in mind of keeping the banking industry safe and sound, keeping your money safe and sound, and assisting in the equitable administration of loans, particularly business loans and real estate loans.
So the savings and loan industry, though, has morphed now into the bank, the full under banks now. Is that right?
Yes.
How did that
Yes.
happen? How did that happen?
Under the Obama administration, in the process of addressing the breakdown, I suggest, in the banking industry as a whole, he wanted to make uniform all of the policies and systems and procedures attributable to the savings and loan industry, make them uniform with the banking industry. At the time, they were separate and apart. The savings and loan industry was insured by the FSLI, and the banking industry was insured by a different agency. So he wanted to bring those two together into one to create a more uniform system for administering banking as a whole. That's what occurred. The older, more established agency was the Comptroller of the Currency. It was an 100-year-old established agency under the federal government, where the Office of Thrift Supervision was a much newer agency. It was less than 30 years old at the time. So he brought those two agencies together, and the successive agency was the Comptroller of the Currency.
So now, is there just one comptroller, or were there district comptrollers? How did that work?
It's divided. System is divided into regions. Yes, there's Western region, Central region, Northeastern region, Southeast region. Yes, under one agency, which is the Comptroller.
And so what region were you in charge of?
Well, I was part of the Western region.
Okay.
The West.
So that is how we saw you in Hawaii. You were as far west as you could go.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
So
that was an exciting assignment. Some people would say it was it's a prime assignment indeed, but a lot of work, and we were under the gun in completing all of our work and tying all of the loose ends up. And once we left, that was the conclusion of our examination.
So when you were asked to go in, let's say they asked you to handle the Northern California region, what would be a reason to bring you in to that region to do your work? What would be a reason for that?
Depending on the bank, what kind of problems or challenges that particular bank would have, our administration would assign individuals with a specialty in that particular area. So if there were problems in loan administration, then people who had a particular facility and assessing loans and reviewing loans, determining the safety of that loan, those were the people who would get assigned to that particular bank. We would go in with teams, depending on the size of the bank, the concerns of that particular bank. It would be a team of 5, or it could be a team of 25, depending on the size of the bank and the intricacies that we would find that were present at that bank.
So when the Comptroller of the Currency shows up at the bank, are they happy or are they sad?
Ours was not a fun arrival. The bank was on its P's and Q's. Their goal was to welcome us, get us in, provide all that we needed so that we could hurry up and get out of it. In some cases, it could be adversarial because the management was not particularly happy to have us come invade their premises, and in many cases we would interrupt the regular flow because we would ask questions and meetings and delving deeper, digging deeper, asking for explanations. So it was a disruption. Indeed, it was a disruption, but unnecessary, depending on how agreeable management was. That would facilitate our being able to get in, do what we needed to do, and get on out of it.
So, was there any time that you can remember that maybe delayed your getting out of there? What was the outcome of that?
Oh, yes. There were conflicts, and over the course of when the economy would go down and concerns would rise in the banking industry and individual banks, the adversarial approach would increase, more combative management. We would encounter that kind of atmosphere was, of course, counterproductive to our getting through and getting our questions answered. Sometimes it became a personal situation on the part of management because, remember, for the most part, bank management at that time consisted of 50-year-old, 60-year-old white males. And so they didn't appreciate these young whippersnappers and minorities in particular coming and telling them what they didn't do, what was incorrect, where they were not following the rules and regulations, where they were in defiance of the regulations, and that this corrective action was necessary, which would involve more detail, follow up on their part. They were not appreciative of that at all. So in many cases, there was a confrontational type of atmosphere that we often would face.
So I can imagine that your visits weren't always welcome with bells and whistles, but
No.
yeah.
That helped me hone my negotiation skills and speaking with others and how to de-escalate concerns and situations. Try to bring calm into the situation. That's really assisted me in honing my skills in that area.
Yeah. Thank you, Judith, for an informing conversation about the banking industry's metamorphosis and your part in enforcing the federal regulations as they pertain to savings and loans. Your sharing may interest others to seek work in this little-known area of banking. And thank you for listening.